everyone. Welcome to the Fuel the Fight podcast. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Nick Behringer. A stupendous show. I don't know if I've used stupendous as the adjective yet, but if I have, I apologize. I'm trying to be original. But because we have an amazing guest, we have Major Jennifer Mullins from the physical therapy. Repeat guest now.
Woo!
You're on here with, we had Lisa on.
Yes, sir.
Talking about strength conditioning. But now we're going to talk about you. We're going to focus on you.
Oh, boy.
Are you doing all right today?
I'm doing great, sir. Thank you for asking.
All right. Yeah. So what I want to know is your Army story. Why are you in uniform?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I mean, through the grace of God and a lot of really awesome people in my life, I was at University of Dayton for undergrad, and I knew I wanted to be a PT. And what just so happened to have a student that was in the program a year ahead of me named Sarah Baker, who was in ROTC, and had somehow gotten wind that she had gotten into this Army-Baylor program. And I hadn't heard about it except kind of downwind from her, and I was up to my eyeballs in student loan debt, and then started to look at it. I'm like, man, taking care of soldiers as a physical therapist sounds like a pretty awesome job. And I applied, and I remember interviewing on the phone with Major Boyle at the time and being absolutely terrified, and got in and could not have been more blessed by this experience. So, my dad was drafted in Vietnam, and so we had a little bit of a backstory in our family growing up about the military. And my dad's drill sergeant's name was Jesus, and when Jesus tells you to do something, you do it. And so, it was just kind of a cool way to kind of bond with my dad and participate in something bigger than myself. So, yes. So, I guess student loan debt and just fortuitous a fellow student kind of set me on the path that has been quite the ride.
Wow. That is awesome. So they brought you in, and then, I imagine, your dad's probably, when you commissioned, was he?
So proud, yes. And he was actually there to promote me to captain when I was at the 101st at Fort Campbell, and we've been able to swap stories ever since. And it's been a real blessing for my family.
That's awesome. So, you're a physical therapist, and now you're an instructor.
Yes.
In the program. You're teaching. You kind of full
It's terrifying, but yes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little about the Doctorate Physical Therapy program, your overview of it, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. So we are a high-speed, intense program. I think that the Uncle Sam has really figured out the way to maximize people in these programs, as you know. We are able to get the most amount of information into our students in the least amount of time. Our students are tip of the spear, intelligent, bright leaders currently that we're continuing to shape. So anyway, and long story short, so it's about a 3-year program in total, but really only 18 months of didactic work. So our students show up in the fall. So we have a new class coming in here now, and they kind of do some Army training for those that aren't in the military. So we have the direct commissioning course in BOLIC. And then we have a little bit of a program orientation and break for Christmas, and then when they come back, they're ours. So then starting in January, we run through the entire head-to-toe neuromusculoskeletal system, and we have a regional approach, which is really a unique way of looking at the human body, in that we look at the body all of the hip. So we're going to do muscles, bones, joints, nervous system, biomechanics. We're going to look at therapeutic exercise. We're going to look at any sort of phys agents or pharmacological agents that we can add for the hip. And we're going to do the same with the knee and the ankle and the cervical spine. And so we really, you hit it over and over and over again in that pattern. And we kind of piece together the body that way. And then we send our students out on their 6-week clinical affiliation. So our students are out there now at different sites across the U.S., and some are local as well. And so they're practicing physical therapy underneath another physical therapist license, and then they'll come back for their final semester. It's a longer semester of neuro. So we have neuroscience, neurorehab, neuroanatomy, and then, of course, a smattering of other courses. And then we kind of culminate the didactic experience with the comprehensive oral examinations. And this is incredibly intense. It's a bit of a rite of passage for our program. So students have 3 rooms that they need to be able to pass. In each room, there is a scientist and a clinician. The scientist will either be an anatomist, kind of a neuroscientist, or a physiologist, and then the other instructor will be kind of the clinician. And we are able to ask anything that they have learned since they've entered our program. And we're asking a lot of our students, but as with all of our programs, you're not just a physical therapist when you're a graduate. You are a military officer, and being able to articulate what you do to your patients and to your commanding officer, to whoever that may be in your AO, is a part of that. And so we do have some high expectations for our students, and they always exceed them. So they have to pass each of those rooms, and it's incredibly stressful, and our students do so well. And then they'll exit to a 1-year, they'll PCS, so they'll actually move and leave the program and serve as an intern for about 1 year before then they technically graduate and move again to their next duty station as a PT.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
They're awesome.
They're awesome. Now, so they move to their next duty station. Now you're a PT, and I know it can vary, like all the different AOCs. But for the typical PT, what's kind of a day in the life? Like, what are you doing?
Oh man, so our new graduates, their primary job is going to be seeing patients. So whether that's in a hospital, they're going to have their own. They're doing evaluations, they're doing treatments. They're kind of managing their schedule. They're probably going to have a little bit of an educational piece, kind of receiving education and giving education to the faculty and staff there as well. And you do have military requirements that they're going to need to keep up on as well, whether it's qualifying on their weapon or training for their next PT test. But our new graduates really get to, it's kind of the sweet spot, is they really get to focus on taking care of patients. So in a hard stand building like a hospital, that's going to look like a scheduled patient load at a larger clinic. At the brigade, it may be a lot more fluid. And at an H2F unit, you may be focusing a lot more on performance optimization, on kind of readiness and resilience. You might be working with a team. So I'm sure our H2F units kind of really get to work together and identify not just how do I recover from an injury, but how do I prevent the next injury? And how do I not just prevent the next injury in this person, but what about this unit? So an 11 Bravo unit of infantrymen is going to have different needs than a unit of tankers. And being able to kind of get into the culture of that is really, really cool. And our students do a great job. I've certainly loved those opportunities to kind of get to be out there with the units and do what they're doing and kind of see what their needs are and how I can help.
Yeah, because you spent your time, speaking of that, with the 101st.
Yes.
So you were out there doing that. What was that like?
It was the best. It was the best. I mean, it was literally like, I love my job. I wouldn't trade my job for the world. That is a career highlight, though. It is really like, it's a great job for somebody who's a self-starter and who just wants, and who's just willing to do it. And it's a great time in your career, too, because you're a young officer. And you really have a little bit more mobility, a little flexibility. And it was really just, to me, felt like a blank check to do whatever I wanted to take care of the soldiers. Now, granted, it didn't come with actual money. Yeah. But like really, I mean, we had the only aquatic rehab program at Fort Campbell at the time. We ran running clinics. I had a yoga class. I mean, we were 11 infantry, so we ran a lot. So we ran. Like, we did all of the things. I fell on my face more than a few times, and I did some great things at the same time. I had cross-trained medics. It really was just I was able to do as much as I wanted to do. And whatever kind of my commanders needed, I was able to kind of speak into that. I did injury prevention screening for an entire battalion one time. Like, what? It was just insane. Some of the big things that we were able to do, we had the support, we were motivated. And we're able to get in that battalion commander, like, hey, like 30% of your guys are really lacking in this area and they would really benefit from this, and you're about to deploy, and I think you need to look at these metrics, sir, because this might affect your readiness, and I don't want you to be struggling with these injuries downrange. So like, how can we incorporate some of these things into your training now?
No, and what a great, I mean, 101st, great culture, one of those storied units, and then you deployed with them.
Yes, sir.
So what was that like as a physical therapist? You're deployed. You're down in Afghanistan.
Yes, sir.
Afghanistan with the 101st physical therapist.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Oh, yeah. Again, like, so we were at the Roll 2, so I, fell under 526, 2nd Brigade Strike, the 526, and we were stationed out of Fob Fenty at the time, but we had soldiers. I think we were initially started at like 7 different FOBs, and we were closing them down to include Bagram. And so once a week I'd get to do battlefield rotations, and I was so thankful that my command team were supportive of that. So me, myself, and then my cross-trained medic, who was Corporal Scarlett Pryor, who has since gone on to become a drill sergeant and like does all these things. She's civil affairs now. I'm so proud of her. Yeah. But anyway, so she and I would travel together. I'd have my like little suitcase full of like TheraBand. I did lots of dry needling, kinesiotape, anything I would do, and we would travel to all the other Roll 1s and take care of the soldiers that they would just kind of have lined up. Like, okay, like Captain Mullins is coming in on this day. We'll rack and stack. We'll go through and treat everybody, and then teach the medics something while we were there. So, hey, I've noticed you're seeing a lot of this. Let me teach you how to do this before the next time I come back. And so we would rotate through the AO that way, getting to travel by helicopter once a week, which is always fun to get to go do that.
Oh, yeah.
And get to see these different FOBs and get to go do cool stuff while we're there. I mean, we're out at Torcum, and so we did the Torcum Challenge because you're running across like the mountain peaks, looking into all these different countries. It's absolutely gorgeous. So it was like just once in a lifetime opportunities to take care of people, and to do all the things that you'd want to do as a professional. And really some really beautiful places.
No, that's awesome. And the other thing you've got to do, did you do long-term education as well? Or?
I did.
Yeah. So I mean, you've done quite a bit. So can you talk a little bit about that? So you have your doctorate in physical therapy, but you also have your PhD. So
yes. So after I got back from deployment, I was the officer in charge of the Soldiers and Training Clinic here at Fort Sam. And I applied for the long-term health education and training. So there's a PhD opportunity for a neurorehab neuroscience. And so the Army just kind of says like, hey, we need somebody that's a little more specialized in this area with a PhD. And so the Army will pay for you to go get a PhD. And I've always been like, well, if the Army's going to pay for a degree, I will take you up on that. So I applied for it and I got it. And it was personally really intimidating because I'm not like really great at this stuff, but I do think those kinds of things are fascinating, and I love learning about it because it just blows my mind, all the different, just all that goes into it, and the ability to change and like neuroplasticity, just it amazes me. So, and it was great for our family. So I had just had our son Israel, and it was a good move for the family to be able to kind of shift gears a little bit. So I was accepted, and we moved to Lexington, Kentucky to go to the University of Kentucky. So I got to kind of be a civilian PhD student
and a
for a
wildcat
little while.
there, yeah.
Yes, and be able to pour into my family a little bit more while I was pursuing the PhD. And with my operational experience and my dry needling experience, I studied kind of that intersection between the two of what are the neurophysiologic effects of dry needling on individuals with chronic ankle instability, because we know just at the 101st, like, man, you can sprain your ankle, and it sounds silly, like I have a sprained ankle, but a sprained ankle can get you redeployed, like, and that chronic ankle instability changes your brain. I like to tease my patients, but there's a study that shows that, when we talk about somatotopic organization of the brain, there's literally less of your brain space devoted to the muscles that control that outward rotation of your ankle in somebody with chronic ankle instability than somebody without. So
wow.
I hope they don't. I tease my patients like, well, you've got a smaller portion of your brain devoted to this, so you're having issues. But we found that with dry needling, we were able to see some positive effects on kind of dynamic balance and kind of kinesthetic awareness. And so that was really cool, and it's really fun to get to study that. And it was operational and focused on soldiers, and so that was really great. And while we were there, we adopted our oldest daughter, and we had our baby, and it was like crazy. It's one of those you look back and you're like, how do we actually do that? But we did. Yeah, so that was a real gift. And so then the Army then put that back to work, that PhD to work, bringing me back here as an instructor.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know you did neuroscience. So I learned something today. And yeah, and the ankle stability thing, yeah, you're right. It's like people think of like a rolled ankle, sprained ankle, but it's like if if a warfighter's in a gunfight, that's kind of important, right? Like to be able to move and stabilize and
Absolutely.
especially under load.
Absolutely. And the earlier onset of arthritis affects us as kind of a shared healthcare organization, right? So now we've got to support that early onset of osteoarthritis for a longer amount of time with more resources. So it matters.
Oh, yeah. No, I love it. For being a physical therapist, you shared all the great things about being a PT. What's the most challenging thing for you found?
I think that it's challenging for me. It's kind of the double-edged sword of being in kind of a socialized medicine system. When the great thing is that you have the ability, I think, especially in the military, we're able to practice at the edges of our scope, and the military supports us in that, and they encourage us to do what needs to be done for our patients. But it's also challenging with just managing access to care and making sure that I'm able to see people when I feel like I should be able to see them, that I have the room to see people because there's a lot of people I want to see, right? And as an Army PT, I'm not just rehab, I'm also trying to prevent things as well. And just wanting to make sure, too, that the soldiers that are coming in for care, that I'm able to find what motivates them. We have a shared mission in the military that's unique, that I think we frequently leverage, right? But in different environments, that may be what unmotivates somebody. And so I guess the short answer to that question is that the challenges are just making sure that I have the time, the ability to treat all the people that need to be treated, so access to care. And then also like finding a pathway that's going to be best for that soldier for their recovery, whether it's in the military or outside of the military. How do I manage that as a green suiter PT with this patient? Right.
Yeah, I imagine, kind of it's got to be challenging because I know your patient load. I mean, you guys are in high demand. Like, yeah, I mean, in any unit, and particularly in the combat arms unit, where you're going to have more injuries. And so for that motivation, are you talking about trying to find the ways to, because a lot of, what you do, you're giving them those exercises to do on their own, is to get them to actually do the rehab? Is it kind of that's the hard piece in terms of them maybe, they come and they see you in the clinic and they'll do the stuff you tell them to do, but then when you give them the piece of paper or whatever and they go home, they're not doing it there?
Yes. And I think it's challenging too when they're like their immediate supervisor is also the one that is involved in their physical training. And so we've got like a lot of competing interests in this person. And in the military, it's not a job where you punch in and you punch out and you could quit or get fired and move on. So it's pervasive. So finding the motivation for that particular patient or soldier that may have some competing interests with their leadership or with their family, with their housing, right? They may live in the barracks and they can't control some of these things, or maybe they don't want to, or people, I love people, but people are messy, and getting a quick read on all of this to maintain that access to care is challenging.
No, that's it's so much, with what we do in nutrition, it's kind of the same thing in terms of all those environmental factors impact it, right? What's being cooked at home, what's being, how can it affect it? So I can empathize there. So we talked about challenging. Now, what's the best thing about being a physical therapist?
Oh my goodness, there's so many best things. I mean, I think as a professional, I think just being able to, like I said, just to really have the freedom to move and the support to move within your scope of practice. Like, that is huge. But I love working with soldiers. I love Joes. I love all of them. I love having a shared mission. I love knowing that we're all moving in the same direction. I love that our patients are generally like, there is already buy-in on fitness. There is already buy-in on kind of maintaining a sense of self. There is already buy-in on like a forward trajectory for their career. So it's not, I mean, we're already a base level motivated as an Army PT, and that is so much fun to get to work with. Plus, I just love Army culture, and I love being able to tease and be sarcastic and joke around with my patients. You know, when I was at the 101st, I was like, you know, just like this young captain, and I'd have just like these big dudes and just like tease them about like how I could run faster than they could, or like how they, you know, were working out too much arms and not getting they're skipping leg day, and like just this military culture of just being able to enjoy one another and yeah. So I don't know. I really don't know how I would ever practice on the outside. I feel so spoiled.
No, that's awesome, and I think we all wearing the green suit, or those that wear, you know, they understand it in terms of like your work environment is your family as much as sometimes as your biological family. Like it's an extension, and you just you know, you don't get that in a lot of other professions. So
yeah, you really do have a sense of community.
So we talked about the best and the worst. Now, what about you know, the future, right? If you had a crystal ball and you're looking, you know, down the road, let's say 20 years, like what's the future of physical therapy look like? I know that's a big question.
The future of like Army physical therapy?
Army, yeah, we can go Army physical therapy.
I think that the future is incredibly bright. I mean, if we just look at the numbers now, we are growing. Our program continues to be incredibly competitive for students coming in, and we're not even able to satisfy our billets that way. We also bring direct commission, like PTs that are already civilian PTs, we're bringing them in too. So I think that with the advent of H2F, we're just continuing to prove our worth throughout. So I think that the future of Army PT is going to be, we're going to be highly utilized more than ever before. We've also demonstrated the way that we can hold commands, both company grade commands, field grade commands. We have the first general officer now as a physical therapist. So there's really physical therapy, and I tell our students this, like, your DPT degree is really the first I expect you to get. I would expect you to tack on multiple, or at least one other specialist certification. I would expect you to do all of the Army schools. I would expect you to excel as a military leader. You can do MAJ, MB. I mean, there's really no limit to it, and my expectation is that they would, and the students that I see do. So I think that we continue to demonstrate how much we have to offer and our desire to do that. I tease that they don't need a signing bonus for PTs or retention bonus for us because we're just too happy doing our job. Like, honestly, we do good work. We enjoy what we do. So maybe we lose out on some bonuses, but I don't think anybody would trade it.
Oh yeah, most physical therapists, and I've run across quite a few in my you know, nearly 20-year career, and worked for I've been lucky. I've had 2 opportunities where my direct supervisor was a physical therapist. So it's been great, and, you know, learned a lot. And yeah, you guys are a happy bunch. And I mentioned the first general officer, General Tahan. She was on the show, so if you want to go back and look and listen to that, yeah. So yes. What about research? Now we you know, you've got your PhD. I know the research lane. What research is going on currently? Specifically, it could be in your kind of neuroscience field or physical therapy that, you know, folks should know about.
I think that there's a lot of focus now on, well, as there has been, right? So on kind of field-based model. So what can I do in the field? What can I equip the boots on the ground PT with, or the boots on the ground medic or OT. Like, what can I give them that's going to be effective to maintain health where they're at? So for an example, I'm hoping that gets funded, a grant study is a multi-center randomized controlled trial. Like, we do dry needling, and we know that chronic pelvic pain, so pelvic floor dysfunction, is a problem, so airborne injury or what have you. But how do we treat that on a cot in a tent in the field? Well, there's dry needling of lumbar muscles we can do. There's some hip muscles we can treat this with, and how effective are we? So that's kind of one research program that's going on now. But I think that we are largely focused on kind of this battlefield medicine, and how do we ensure that we're effective with training our new PTs and our current PTs with how to take care of, to provide higher level care at a lower level of kind of location, right? So a role one versus kind of back at the MTF or the hospital. Let's get them the skills that they need to keep the mission going.
Right. Yeah. Something you can take, because you can have all the tools in the hospital, but if they don't transfer out to the field, it's not very helpful in that environment. For dry needling, so because I've seen so much more of this, and I have ignorance on the topic, and so since I have an expert, I'm going to ask. Is that just the thought being for the mechanism? You're increasing the blood flow by kind of like perturbating the tissue, or what's the mechanism there?
That's a great question, and I don't have a great answer for it. So we've got some theories on it. I mean, we know some things happen, right? So we know that the pH of the muscle tissue changes. We know that some of the inflammatory biochemicals are resolved. We know that blood flow does increase. We know that we have a change in muscle tone, so where a muscle tone might be increased before and it's decreased after. But as far as like a cause and effect mechanism, that has yet to be established. One of the things that I did study while I was at UK was kind of how might dry needling be improving the balance that I was seeing. And I theorized that within a muscle, if you've got a muscle with some trigger points in it, you're kind of, in a military sense, you're sending poor intel up to your brain. So your brain is getting information that is conflicting. This muscle saying that we're kind of keyed up, and this part, these receptors in this part of the muscle saying that we're okay. And so I'm not really able to execute a quality decision for that muscle. And then when I dry needle, I'm able to decrease the tone in those irritable spots of the trigger points. And so now I'm able to send up better quality intel to my brain to execute a more effective decision for that muscle. And that, I suspected, may have been why we were seeing improved dynamic balance, is because now I had better information with which to execute a decision.
Oh, wow. No, that's fascinating. And then I should have asked this question first, is just for people who don't know what dry needling is. Can you briefly describe the technique?
So this is something all Army PTs do at this point, or in process of doing. But so we take an acupuncture needle, and we kind of locate a trigger point, a hyper-irritable spot, a knot within the skeletal muscle, and we are able to put the needle into that trigger point spot, and then we can piston. You can kind of sometimes kind of rotate. Sometimes a PT might use electrical stimulation like we would with the TINS, and treat that trigger point. And then then we can see a response. And that response might be decreased pain, improved range of motion, improved function of that muscle, of the treated muscle. So it's really one of the many things that Army PTs have to do that battlefield medicine, right? To provide higher level care at a lower level of medical provision, I guess. I don't know the best way to say that, but
no, that's great. I've always been kind of fascinated, because I've seen so much more being in the military. PTs doing this or talking about it or whatever, and I'm like, oh well, now they got an expert. I'll just ask about dry needling.
I'll give you what I got, at least.
I'll find out. I think it was always Rich Westrick. I'd always hear him talk about dry needling at Usarium, and so that was always interesting. For folks that are interested in your program, How do they best prepare for it? Because it's highly competitive. Like, what's the rank? You guys are ranked in the top 5 in the nation?
I think we're in the top 20.
Top 20.
We were in, I think we're in the top 20 for
Yeah.
sure. And the best way, so we've got a website, and go to baylor.edu/physical therapy.
And I'll put it in the show notes.
Thank you. There is a Baylor University physical therapy program also. So Baylor proper, who we love and who's partnered with us for such a long time, does have a hybrid PT program that's not in the military. So this is not that. This is the military's program. And so you can get on there on the website, and it has all of the prerequisites. And I would definitely recommend having those prerequisites, having a plan for the prerequisites, and doing well in the prerequisites, because we are a pretty competitive program. And then you can apply to the program through PTCAS, the same website that you would use to apply to any PT program. So as you're applying, you would apply to our program as well. We do have a little bit earlier deadline to get your application in, because we do take a little longer to review all of the applications and to do interviews, and then we have to send, like a civilian program wouldn't need to send for a security background, but we do. Yeah. So we've got to send everything to the board and kind of get those background checks and things done. So I would just caution applicants to check that early and often, and just make sure everything's in. We're currently in the application cycle is closed, and we're currently reviewing applications now for, I think that would be the class of 2026.
Wow.
I know.
No,
that's really far away, but.
And you take both people coming straight out of college, or if you got any prior service folks out there, green suiters currently, who have those prereqs who want to become a physical therapist.
Yeah, we do. I think those are some really awesome applications to review. So yeah, I was a direct commissionee, so I was just like, and joined the military and learned a lot really quickly. But yeah, so if you're already a military service member and you're interested and you want to become a PT, get on there and apply. So we have a 10-year kind of expiration of prerequisites. But if your prerequisites are within 10 years, you're a competitive applicant, like, please apply. And you'll be able to speak to leadership and different military experiences that other applicants would not be able to. So yeah, you can be a direct accession is what we call it. So those that come directly from undergrad. You can be prior service, so currently serving, National Guard, Reserve, active duty, any of the services can apply. Or we can also sometimes we just take people that are currently physical therapists and just bring them right into the military, but those wouldn't come through our program. But that is another route to be a military physical therapist.
So you get all the routes covered.
You're
routes. In school, you're serving right now listening to this, or you're a physical therapist out on the outside, and you're like, hey, that sounds pretty cool working with units like the 101st. I want to come do that. You can come in. The best place for people to find information is that Baylor website?
That Baylor website. That's going to have everything on there. And we've got it like an organizational email box on there. And if you're like me, you're probably like a little suspicious, like, okay, but which country is this being sent to? No, we have a team here in San Antonio, Texas, and we answer all of those questions. And get them to the person who's gonna be able to give the information. Like, we are all over that. That's a real email. That's a real
email, people. And so I'll put this all in the show notes, so you can go on there if you're interested, and email a real human find out about the program. Any other kind of closing thoughts for the folks listening?
Oh my goodness, I think I don't regret it for a moment, and I'm sure you don't either, sir. This ride is something I never would have anticipated. Somebody asked me recently, like, when you were an undergrad and you knew you wanted to be a PT, what did you picture? And I just pictured me being a PT and a wife and a mom. And I look at where I'm at now, and it just almost brings me to tears just to think about all of the opportunities I've had and all of the things I've been terrified to do but still somehow did. And even to be on this podcast. I mean, things that you're just like, these things that just wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been in the military, hadn't have met somebody, hadn't had that community that we have. And of course there's a cost to it, and my husband and my children are warriors just like any of the rest of us. But this is certainly something that has shaped my life like I never expected in some really wonderful ways.
No, that's awesome, and the Army is lucky to have you. You're such a dynamic personality.
Thank you, sir.
I'm so happy to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on. Hey, everyone, thanks for listening. Go to wherever you consume your podcast, subscribe the show. Let us know what you think about it. And until next time, we are signing off today, and have a great day.